So again, a warm welcome to all of you who ventured out tonight on this, I don't know, I guess we could call it a winter to spring night. It's still February, but it felt a little bit more like spring today. And for whatever reason you showed up here tonight, whether it's to cultivate some self-reliance, some sense of community with this group that are here. Need more sound? Okay. All right. I thought I'd start with a couple of quotes tonight for reflection, and both of these are expressing similar ideas. They're just stated a little differently. The first one is a mashup of the Bible, Gloria Steinem, and a teacher that I know on the West Coast. And this is what this quote says: "The truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off. And then it will break your heart. And then, if you don't turn away, it will open your heart. The truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off, and then it will break your heart. And then, if you don't turn away, it will open your heart." And the second quote is a short poem. It's actually just one sentence by Robert Frost. It's called "Dust of Snow." Maybe you know it. "The way a crow shook down on me the dust of snow from a hemlock tree has given my heart a change of mood and saved some part of a day I had rued." The way a crow shook down on me the dust of snow from a hemlock tree has given my heart a change of mood and saved some part of a day I had rued. So tonight's talk is, I titled it "The Power of the Wholesome," but I've been thinking in the last hour it's really more about tilting toward the wholesome. Kind of goes with the season as we tilt toward the sun. We're all beginning to notice the early signs of spring, and so there's a kind of tilting in us toward that light, toward the warmth. This tilting toward the wholesome is really reminding us that we have choice. At any moment, we have choice not to turn away, to see the full spectrum, to awaken to everything that's here, and to welcome everything that's here. I mentioned in the meditation tonight this notion of expanding to include even those visitors we don't really want to welcome. The negative thoughts, the irritation, the hatred, the pain, whatever's going on, can we awaken to it? Can we welcome it? Can we expand and allow it in? It's so easy to get absorbed or consumed or overwhelmed by the negativity that seems to saturate us, particularly in the news cycles. Every time we go to a screen, it gives us some information that can really color the way in which our thoughts arise, even our being. And sometimes even the Buddhist teachings can sound a little heavy laden. I'm reminded of the story of this notion that a lot of us have been in spiritual traditions, perhaps before turning towards Buddhism, and some of us left the Protestant spiritual fold after being told all sinners are condemned to hell. And some of us left the Catholic fold after hearing you are stamped with original sin. And now we turn to Buddhism when we have, well, really, there are 3 unwholesome roots in you. There are 5 hindrances, 7 underlying tendencies, negative ones, by the way, and 10 fetters. And we might conclude, oh, wow, maybe I should just have settled for 1 original sin. So in this 21st century, which is not unlike every other preceding century, we are subject to the unwholesome. So the question then becomes, what if we were to place an emphasis on developing or tilting towards the power of the wholesome, taking joy in the wholesome? And the wonderful thing is that the Buddha's words point us in this direction in so many different places. He writes, "It's possible to develop the wholesome. If it were not possible to develop the wholesome, I would not tell you to do so. I would not tell you to do so. But because it is possible to develop the wholesome, therefore I tell you, develop the wholesome. It's pretty explicit, fairly repetitive. And he makes a point here that each of us has this capacity to inquire, to discern what's true in any moment. He has also said, come and see for yourself. Don't place blind trust in impressive personalities or even in venerated gurus, but examine the issue for yourself. When you know for yourself that something is unwholesome and harmful, then you should reject it. And when you know for yourselves that something is wholesome and beneficial, you accept it and put it into practice. So again, great clarity about direction. And all we have to do is to make that discernment between what's wholesome and what's less wholesome. So many places to begin, but and each of you may have a place that you turn towards as a way to nurture your own well-being in this practice. One of the things I'll just remind you of tonight that is available to all of us, and perhaps we do this in many different forms, is to take refuge in what we call the three jewels or the triple gem. The triple gem is something that can safeguard us because it reminds us of what we tend to forget when we're in the heat of the moment or lost in the darkness of any moment. And the first jewel, the Buddha, is the refuge of remembering both the historical Buddha, so we can read the suttas, understand what he has spoken, what he has said, but we can also remember our own Buddha nature, the radiance, the wisdom that lies within, the natural compassion that we each have in response to the suffering of others, the wisdom that lies within. We tend to forget at times when we're awash in a wave of whatever has consumed us, whether it's originating here or externally. So that's the first jewel. The second one is the Dharma or the teachings. And this is where our opportunity comes to investigate, to examine, to discover or remember what's true. For example, we can see how each of us repeatedly go through cycles of birth, aging, and death. And we wake up to our transient identities, an identity that may last for a year or for a decade, but then we see it differently. We wake up and that identity, some piece of it shifts and we move on. Now it's something else. We give up that old identity. We go through growth, romance, relationships, separation, decay, death, and everything we begin to see appears as constantly changing. There's a shifting stream of form, and we see this flow kind of like a changing kaleidoscope of phenomena that doesn't stop changing. It keeps on. So that's the second jewel. And then the third one is that of the Sangha, which is the community. It's the people sitting right around you here tonight. So turn and see who's on your left, who's on your right, who's in front of you, who's behind you. This is your Sangha. These people who are here tonight, it's the people you sit with on retreat, the people you sit in a mindfulness class with. It's those who intend to wake up and to support and be supported by all of those around us who have the same intention, the awakening of all. And so, just to reiterate, the guidance that's available from the refuge, that's available from the triple gem, these three jewels, can't protect us from adversity. That's impossible. But it can safeguard us from some of the dangers of a negative response. So this is a kind of protection, if you will, and a real refuge from the negative reactions that to dangers that beset us daily. We kind of find ourselves perhaps at times swerving to get out of our own ruts that we've created over decades of living. And often what we're seeking to do is to unhook from some repetitive or ruminative way of being or thinking. And what we can remember in those moments is the three refuges and this notion that at the heart of every circumstance is a place of freedom. And so maybe then it becomes a little bit easier to say, if we can remember that, well, what's wise in this moment? What would tilt me toward the wholesome? Pema Chodron writes about compassionate living, and some of the things she writes is, I think, really are ways of tilting toward the power of the wholesome. And I'm going to go through a couple of them right now, several of them as a matter of fact. And really, you could take any one of these and declare it as a practice for the next week, the next month, the next year, and see what unfolds for you. So one of her guidelines, she says, is generosity, giving as a path of learning to let go. There's so many forms to that, ways in which we could ask ourselves in any moment, what would it mean to be generous now, here, with this thought, with this action, with this resource? Generosity as a way to lean toward the wholesome. Another one might be discipline, which would be a training in not causing harm. So what would it mean to not cause harm and to do it in a way that's flexible and maybe even a little daring? Not causing harm. A third one might be patience. So in this speeded up world of ours where we want things instantly, what would it be to cultivate patience as a way of tilting toward the wholesome? And what that would mean, I think, for a lot of us is learning to live with, abide with our restlessness, our energy, and allowing things to sort of evolve, emerge at their own speed without needing to force it, push it, have it turn out a particular way. She goes on to say, if waking up takes forever, still we just go moment by moment, giving up all hope of fruition and enjoying the process. Whoa, really? Giving up all hope of fruition and just enjoying the process. So, patience. Joyful enthusiasm. Letting go of perfectionism, connecting with the living quality of any moment. And she says, constantly apply cheerfulness, if for no other reason than because you're on this spiritual path. So, joyful enthusiasm. Have a sense of gratitude for everything, even difficult emotions, because of their potential to wake us up. And then, of course, meditation, the training to come back to being right here, but doing so with gentleness and precision. So a little bit of that element of discipline, perhaps. And I guess what we know is that freedom is found in seeing things clearly and compassionately, taking responsibility for our own actions in the heart of every circumstance. Maybe that's the tricky part, is the constancy with which we apply ourselves, the dedication with which we pay attention to being alive. One of the ways that we can do this is just simply notice the old patterns that come up, those little ruts that you've become familiar with. Just notice when they come up and see if it's possible to greet them with some something akin to friendliness. And we might also notice how identified we are with it, how easy it is to sort of fall back into that rut because it's so familiar. And so one of the questions might be, could we choose gentleness? Could we choose non-judging, not calling things right or wrong, good or bad, but instead looking honestly at what's arisen, what our view is, and just noticing that's our view, and our tendency to sort of classify all other views as just slightly inferior to ours because ours is so well thought out, or at least it's well practiced, perhaps. So choosing to go forward, to continue to go forward, means you don't get completely overwhelmed or frozen by any one identity, whether it's, that notion of how the ego swells up and we feel magnificent and we feel good, and that's a really nice feeling. And then someone says something or does something, or we read something and we're deflated and the ego collapses, and all of a sudden now we feel the weight. And so how it is that we can continue to see that in that moment, though we may feel frozen or overwhelmed, that's not the truth, that's not the reality. The form is constantly changing. So we talk about stillness, particularly in this practice of sitting meditation, but stillness is not about stopping anything, stopping the mind. It's really pausing to shine the light of awareness on what is, what's true, so that we become more aware of what we're thinking, what we're feeling, what we're sensing in this moment, rather than perhaps trying to make it a certain way, or have it come out a certain way, or live up to a certain expectation. And what we begin to see, of course, is that we're not limited to any one passing experience. We are everything. Do you have some sense of that? That we are everything. We belong to the whole. The freedom, the peace that we're looking for is not a peace that crumbles as soon as there's some difficulty or chaos. Whether we're seeking an inner peace or a global peace or some combination of the two, the way to experience it is to build on the foundation of unconditional openness to all that's arising. So peace, again, is not an experience that's free of challenges, free of roughness. It's an experience that's expansive enough to include all that arises without us feeling threatened. So our task is, on the one hand, we come here, as we said, for the sake of Sangha, and we want to awaken this heart-mind for the benefit of ourselves, but also for the benefit of all beings. And once we understand and remember that this is our intention, then we have a context in which to hold it and to measure each of our actions. We can ask ourselves, does this action I'm about to engage in help me to awaken, or does it hinder me in some way? Is this what's done by one who is skilled in what's good? Is it wholesome? Day to day, it may be really difficult to discern any growth or change. Sometimes we have a hard time seeing that. It's like looking in the mirror at yourself every day. You don't look like you've changed. You still look like you did when you were 15, right? So day to day, it's maybe really hard to discern that gradual inner growth, some increasing level of awareness. But if your practice is steady and continuous, you sit on a day long occasionally, go on a retreat, then you can be sure that your moments of being awake are increasing as steadily as those moments of daylight in this season. And speaking of this season, some of you may know that the next full moon is day after tomorrow on Thursday. And like January, we're about to have another month with 2 moons, 2 full moons. It'll be March 1st in this country, but if you were in Europe or the East, it would be March 2nd. Second full moon will be at the end of the month. And this full moon, as they all have names. This is something I learned recently. They all have names, and what they're named is dependent upon where you live, what culture, what geography, the hemisphere that you're in. In this country, early Native Americans called the full moon of March the full worm moon, because it's the time of the year when the frozen earth starts to thaw and the earthworms begin to rise to the surface. The full moon and a gratitude for ancestors are historically closely related in some parts of the world. David and I traveled to Vietnam and Cambodia recently, and we learned from our guide, who was from Hanoi, that he performs a ritual twice a month in appreciation of his ancestors. And it occurs on the full moon and the new moon of each month. And he goes to an altar in his home with his children and his parents, all of whom live in the same household, and offer gratitude for all those ancestors who have gone before him, lived before him. So, tilting ourselves toward the power of the wholesome, we too can reflect on gratitude. And so I invite you here right now just to sit back in your chair, relax, allow the body to be at ease. You might notice if there's any place of contraction. Invite expanding, softening. The muscles of the face, the front of the throat, the tops of the shoulders, the palms of the hands, the belly, the feet. Allowing your body to be relaxed and open. Your breath easy. And you might begin a practice of gratitude by feeling how year after year you have cared for your own life. Ways in which you have befriended yourself. And now let yourself begin to acknowledge all that has supported you in this care. With gratitude, we remember the people, the animals, plants, insects, creatures of the sky and sea, water, fire, air, and earth, all whose joyful exertion blesses our lives every day. With gratitude, we remember the care and labor of 1,000 generations of elders and ancestors who came before us. We offer gratitude for the safety and well-being that we've been given. We offer gratitude for the blessings of this earth that we've been given. We offer gratitude for the measure of health we have been given. We offer gratitude for the family and friends we have been given. We offer gratitude for the community we have been given. We offer gratitude for the teachings and lessons we have been given. We offer our gratitude for the lives we have been given. Thank you for being here tonight, for your practice, and for your intentions.